Hey guys, this is DFD aka Dark Frozen Depths back with another Kamihime project video. Now, before I get started into talking about these two events, I do have to point out that my internet was off for like 4 days, so I was unable to do literally any recordings or anything. I did record the Ragnarok fight for the previous event. That's already been done and it should be uploaded pretty soon. But also, I have a Dynasty Warriors video that I wanted to just do because I was playing my PlayStation 4 at the time. So that's just there as well if anybody wants to check that out. But due to the fact I was unable to access the internet, there's a few games I haven't logged into. There's a few where I completely missed out on some stuff, like the last event. I literally could not do anything, so I did whatever I did before the Ragnarok fight was recorded. I stopped at that point and was never able to get back to it. I even struggled to get a little bit of the free pools because I am able to access mobile, but not all the time, so there's that. But anyways, with this event that's coming up, it is a reprint, so it is a rerun of a previous Advent event. I have to point out, if you do need a good testing ground in order to know how strong you are for these Advent events, there are weekly Advents that you can do. The difficulties are literally the same. The only difference is the fact that you cannot farm Ragnarok for drops on these advents, because the weekly ones allow you to do that. The actual events only let you do one Ragnarok run per day. Now, while it is the same exact difficulty, it may or may not be the same element. It depends on when it lands up. But it's still a very good testing ground to see how good you are for these events, and you should be able to farm at least Ultimate if you want to really get everything. Now, the event itself, Litan is Thunder, so Wind's going to have the advantage. Try to avoid using water. And in the case of the weapon, when these repeat, there's usually a final break limit weapon, and in this case, it depends on what it depends on what you have or what you may or may not need. Now, that said, it is still high priority if you do happen to need it. The Adoan is, in my opinion, a higher priority, and that's been the case for quite a few events in a row recently. The gacha tickets are definitely high priority, and I would push the magic jewels up to be a little bit more higher priority because of how many times we're going to need to basically use them for pulls, especially with a lot of limited Kamihime that we just had, and some on the horizon you maybe need a refill. So now would probably be a good time to really stock up on the magic jewels, especially since if you're still trying to get limited Kamihime, that might still be available. Now, there's also the other SSR weapon. Is still dependent on what you may or may not need. It needs more materials and it does not final break, so that makes it a little bit more iffy. I would put that in like medium priority, like how they did here. Now, of course, Raid Kamihime ticket, you can ignore that if you already have them. And in my case, I do have every single Kamihime that came from a raid event, so I don't need it. Other players are like that as well. It depends on when you started and how many of them you managed to get. You can get some of them from Epic Quests though, so if you haven't done all your Epic Quests, that's a lot of Kamihime you can knock off of that ticket right there. Now, the only other things I could possibly suggest is maybe the soul points, if you need a little bit of catch up and you're a newer player. And maybe the SR assault weapon if you're really, really early into the game, because it's just a quick little boost. But anyways, that's all I can really suggest for those. But the main thing is to try and do the basic event grinding, which is Ultimate, if you can. If not, Expert can still get you some stuff, but you'll be hard pressed to really clean out the entire list. Now, Litan herself, her fight is very interesting considering the fact that you have to really pay attention to her turns. Regardless of the difficulty, she gets the same set of attacks. It is lightning damage to one enemy, and she recovers HP based on the damage she deals. and that is the very first turn in every single fight, as well as the first action she will take after doing either one of her bursts, which is normal or raging. So she will constantly try to heal herself throughout the fight. So if you're not shelling out enough damage, she can actually out heal your damage output. Now, what this also will do is increase her orb count by 1. So out the very first turn, she should get 2 orbs. And then it also cancels any buff effects on whoever you gets hit. So be very, very careful of that. So she'll start removing your buffs. She'll start increasing her rate of doing her bursts. She'll start recovering her HP all in one skill, and it can actually deal a decent amount of damage if you're not careful. Reason I say that is because whenever she does either burst, it will give her an attack boost, which can stack on top of each other. So if she has both of them, you're really going to have a problem. Now, one, which is a normal one, is going to be large damage to one enemy. So basically, one of your characters is going to be taking quite a hit. The other one is going to be damage to the entire team, which is a raging one. But either time she does one of these, she will put a buff on herself. So the key to this fight, to really surviving it, is to either out damage her before she can take you out, or you need to remove her buffs. And it is very, very dangerous if she has both of them. So removing buffs definitely will help. Now, on Expert, she has 670,000 HP. On Ultimate, she has 1,100,000 HP. And on Ragnarok, she has 3 million HP. Given the nature of these fights, if you take them on at the level you're supposed to, that can actually be quite a long fight. So she is packing quite a bit of HP and can recover it, so be very, very careful. Now, 20% of the damage she deals is what she'll recover, as far as I know. But it's still the fact that she can keep doing it, especially on Ragnarok. It can be very, very frequent because she has 1 less max orb count. Because it takes 4 to fill up on the other difficulties, but Ragnarok is 3. So that's something to be very, very careful of. But definitely be very wary about her buffs, because they will stay on. They will never get removed. So if you're not capable of just bursting your HP down very, very quickly, you could be in for a very painful fight if you don't remove those. Now, for Litan herself, when you get her, she is definitely worth for using as a main add-on, because of the fact that she will give Lightning Elemental, and then even in some cases you might still want her even if you have something powerful because of the second effect, which is burst gauge increase. These from the add-ons are actually pretty powerful because it is 20% burst gauge increase using one of her, and using 2 of her it adds up to 40%. That means out of every 10 you'll deal, like every 10 burst gauge you get, which is essentially like every single hit you do, you're getting an extra 2. And if you have 2 of her, you're getting an extra 4. I've done this just for speed purposes before, where I did that on my light team with Yuri, because of the fact that light has their own version as well, and it gave such a massive increase that it seriously filled up burst gauges, because it was like 30% from Yuri's buff, 20% from setting a main add-on, which I think was Kenshi, and then 20% from another one. You can do the same thing with Litan, and I know there's a few other elements that can pull that off as well. So that's it. You can start getting a lot of burst gates to get some really fast burst cycles if you're really starting off. Or you can even do it at later points of the game if you want to sacrifice some elemental for it, but it depends on what you want to do in that case. Now, the bow. This one you're going to want if you don't have too many of the other stronger weapons. Excuse me. I seem to cough in every video now, I don't know why. But you want this weapon if you either A, you want boosted healing because of the second effect, or B, you want the you don't have too many of the stronger weapons like Foal's gun, stuff like that. Now, this does final break in a large assault, but it still stays a small ascension. And depending on some of the setups and whatnot, ascension could help. I mean, a lot of people love getting Dion, and this will just give her even more ascension to help her heals out. It depends. But the other weapon happens to be a staff, and this is the one you'll probably end up skipping because it is large pride with small defender. And that isn't too bad of a combo of skills. It's just it doesn't final break, which holds it back quite a bit. Pride actually can be a substitute for assault, but because it doesn't final break, it really holds it back. Now there's a lance that's basically your SR assault, and then there's a sword that's your SR defender. These two you can probably skip, but if you are really early and trying to start off, like say you started like a week ago, maybe you can use these to get a little bit of a boost. Now, as for the missions, same stuff as before. Clear without using the elixir, clear with characters below a certain rarity, clear ultimate with fire in this case. So if you use R Kamihime and Fire Kamihime at the same time, as in the entire team is R and Fire, and this includes your sub slots, so remember that. But if you use R and Fire Kamihime, they will be doing 3 of these missions at once. 4 of them if you happen to do it without an elixir. So that's something to keep in mind. But you can indeed fight her every single day 5 times for more half elixirs if you happen to need that stocked up, and that's quite abusable because of the fact that say you don't really care too much about the event anyways and you've already gotten what you want from it, you could just do beginner like 5 times and still not even burn out that much AP. So that's something I feel like I should mention, but some players have probably already figured that out. And lastly, I do have to mention that depending on what you have on these cores, you may or may not want to trade for the Dragonic Eye Shards because of the fact that you do need these for 4th tier souls. I have to keep reminding people about that. And you need quite a lot of them. But now that we have weekly events, we gotten access to a lot more of them, so it may or may not be as bad as you think, but it's still quite a bit of cores in order to trade for that. So that's something to know. Now, that's all for that event. Now I'm going to jump ahead to this event that should be getting announced pretty soon too, because this is right after it. This is going to be the 8th guild competition event, and some of you may be wondering, oh, do I need to go after Thunder Element if I'm not working towards it? This is one of the reasons why. Because it's not just Tower, which also should be on the horizon pretty soon, but also guild competition that's now starting to force you to work on all 6 elements to get the most out of those events. And then there's future content too, where you'll start seeing the same mechanic from guild competition, where if you're not using the elemental advantage team, you will deal 1/10 of the damage you normally would deal. On top of that, debuffs will not work. Now, the last guild competition, this was bugged, and the developers never fixed it, but that should be the norm, where it should be you have to use elemental advantage to really do anything on these. Otherwise, your scores are going to really suffer, especially considering that you cannot debuff. Now then, this 8th one is going to be pretty special. First off, it is 11 turns long, and at this point it seems like we're going to have nothing but total damage in battle, especially looking at the JP side, which I had it since the 5th one. But what total damage means is all the damage you deal every single turn in the fight. Now, what makes it interesting with 8th is this one thing. If you use balanced or tricky base characters, their damage is multiplied by 1.5 times. This also includes souls. And this bypasses caps. This does indeed bypass caps. So you're going to want them. You're going to want to have balanced or tricky characters in order to pull this stuff off. Now, The other thing about this is the fact that the enemy is going to buff their attack power every so often. So be very wary of that. And even more so, it is going to work even if the enemy is under paralysis. So if there's anything that makes them not have a turn, they will still use this. So there is literally no way to prevent them from stacking attack buffs on themselves. So that's something to pay very close attention to. But again, the biggest thing is that if you are not attacking with elemental advantage, you lose 90% of your damage output. So be very, very careful. But if you're using balanced or tricky characters, they get a 50% damage increase, and it bypasses caps. So if you did, say, 300,000 damage, then you'll see them do 450,000 damage, even though the soft cap is 350,000 on a normal attack. So you will still see them do that despite the soft caps. So you can really shell out a lot of damage by using those two types. So look up each and every balanced and tricky character you have for each element and set up teams accordingly with that. Now then, that said too, is also to try and optimize things more by getting as much defense down as you can. And to make matters worse too, the enemy when they burst will increase the combo attack rate, and they will, it says immediately do a normal attack and then do a combo attack as well. That means that they're going to start comboing you, so be very, very careful with that. But to really optimize things, get as much defense down as you can among your team while still meeting the conditions for both balance and tricky. The problem is that not every element has access to a full team of it, and some of these full teams will need limited characters. So be very, very careful with that one. Like, I can see out the gate that some of these will be a little bit troublesome, because to make matters worse for this one, you need, if you do not have limited Kamihime for Light, for example, you will need Michael, Eros, Tish, and Shamas, because the other SSR are limited. Otherwise, you're dipping into your SR in order to try and get them to do a damage boost. And quite frankly, that might be a valid strategy, considering the fact that the 1.5 times damage multiplier could push SR damage to beat SSR that don't get the boost. So test things out on that. But be very, very wary of that. In fact, Fire has exactly 4. And then Light, if you do not have the limited Kamihime, has exactly 4 as well. So it is very, very tight on that. Be very, very careful. This is between both Balance and Tricky, who both get the boost. Now, the thing with defense down as well, those of you that don't know, you have to stack it in multiple frames. So you gotta do like B frame, A frame, C frame if you happen to have access to it. Not too many characters do. Then there's the stackable frame, which is on its own, and then the Dolan frame as well. And elemental debuffs do count as these. So if you debuff wind resistance, then that means you will deal more damage with wind characters, and it counts as defense down. So keep that in mind. Frames do not stack on themselves except for the stackable frames. What that means is if you do an A frame debuff, another A frame debuff cannot exist. So the highest of the two will apply. That's something I have to point out, because some characters do have access to the same frames if you really look at the list. So you have to be very careful of that. And this does indeed work on buffs as well, which is something I'm running with issues on right now with, say, Michael and Light Shiva. They both buff light elemental attack, so they kind of conflict with each other. So I had to alternate the two if I really want to get the most out of it. Debuffs, you cannot alternate. So if you need to, alternate your buffs, but in the case of debuffs, do not try to alternate them, just try to avoid clashing. Now, in the case of anybody that's got like tricky or balance based soul effects, that would be the Van Helsing line, the Ability Kill line, and the Crowley line. That would mean if you're going for S-Class souls, Hector, Caspar, and I forget her name, but it's Para something. It's not Parashurama because that's her line, and it's not the other one, which is Mordred line. It's Perseus is the Mordred line one. Yeah, not Hector. Sorry, but you have to be very very wary of what your souls have for their types as well if you really want to make the most of this. In my case, I love using Caspar. I would have to recommend her if you have nobody else because of the fact that Caspar will do some incredible team-based effects. It just depends on how much snatch you get on the enemy, and you can get it up there pretty quickly. So, that said, Caspar is definitely my go-to for this one, which is why I'm glad I unlocked her. But there's others that you could possibly use as well, so something to know. But I do have to point out that Caspar, if you use her buff effect instead of her heal, you'll still get the 50% attack and defense in B frame. Because both her buff effect and her heal has that. What makes the difference is the fact that the buff effect can last longer than the heal version of the skill. The heal is just an AoE heal if you get to the 6 stacks, and it's like 3 turn buffs. If you use the other thing you could set, where it's her buffs, it will be AoE all the time. Only it will last longer based on the snatch stacks, and if you max it out, it is 5 turn duration for 50% attack, 50% defense. It will give, if I remember correctly, 20% to both double attack and triple attack. And then it also gives 30% stinger. So that's a lot. And since you're forced to basically use elemental advantage, stinger is very, very powerful. So that is an incredible buff to have. So, me personally, that's why I like Caspar. She would definitely play very, very good in this. However, you could still go the whole route of, say, like Yuri and then just get your burst cycles going a lot faster. But personally, since you have a boost that violates the damage caps, I would rather go tricky or balanced. So, again, test out what works best for you, because maybe you haven't even built up the characters that have that stuff. Who knows? But, anyways, that's all for that. Keep this one thing in mind, too, I have to say. Do not, and I repeat, do not trade guild or tower medals for anything other than the SSR break limit items. Those purple items that usually cost 5-digit trades, those are the only things that are worth it. Do not trade for anything else. It is honestly a waste to go for magic jewels or gacha tickets. While no one is stopping you from doing that, it was a waste to do that. You can get gacha tickets from so many other places. And you can get so many magic jewels per event now. In fact, if I add up both this event and the last event, like the Litan event and the previous raid event, that is 24 gacha tickets and 6,000 magic jewels, and that's not even including the stage clears. So it is a waste to get anything other than those purple break limit items that you need for Adoans and weapons, especially given how valuable they really are. It is very, very hard to get those. As a free player, the only reasonable time to get those are from these guild competitions or the tower events. So I cannot stress that enough. Do not get anything else. If it is not a medal trade for 5 digits out of the guild competition or the tower event, do not do it. Again, the SSR break limit, the weapon break limit things, which we call bricks because they literally look like a brick. And then there's a purple Adoan version, which is a Chaldea. You can call that an Adoan brick. Those are the only things worth it. Cannot stress that enough. Because if you want the other method to get them as a free player, 20 Dragonic Eyes. And this is made worse when we get a future weapon that will Like, there will be a future set of weapons that will give some very, very powerful effects, but those need 50 Dragonic Eyes, and you can only get one copy, meaning you will need these break limit items for them. So, again, cannot stress that enough. Do not trade for anything else. There's only one thing you should get on each list, and it is the SSR break limit sets. Because they will give you some of the books, but you can grind those out, the gold and silver books. But the most important thing is those purple break limit items. And you really want to be very, very picky about what you use those on as well. Good candidate for the Adolan ones is easily 100% Adolans, Divine Beasts, Kaisers, those type of Adolans. You don't want to use it on anything else, especially not an event one. Even if the event will never come back ever again, do not do that. But anyways, that's all for this. More is going to come soon because I always do videos of these events when they come out, the guild competition events. I won't do one of the Litan event though because it's a repeat and I completely demolish any sort of content with any team at this point. Because at this point, events are trivial regardless of who I use, even if I go for a disadvantage. I am that strong on all 6 elements now. But anyways, that's all for this. More of this is going to come soon, and take care.